Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Bethany. I am an opera singer and I was in Beachbody from 2014 to 2021. And on my channel, I talk a lot about MLMs and kind of my journey out, and I analyze and react to, oh goodness gracious, trying to get the shot framed. I react to a lot of MLM huns, and today I want to kind of do a special episode to talk a little bit about religious deconstruction. So I don't even really need my intro or disclaimer, but maybe I'll run it just for consistency's sake.
Honey, I'm a perfect 10. Whoa, whoa. And if I say it enough, it gets ingrained in my head, and I start to.
So the reason that I want to talk about this today is because as I'm filming this, this should go up in like a week and a half, but as I'm filming, it is September 13th. And so this past week, we had the Charlie Kirk situation. You know what it is, but to be YouTube friendly, I'm going to say the situation. And the reason I'm talking about religious deconstruction now is that I've been thinking about talking about it, and you guys have asked me to kind of expand on it. And so what happened is that a lot of evangelical Christians, MAGA Christians, they're not, in my opinion, not really Christians, they're Christian nationalists, which is nothing like Jesus Christ. A lot of them are lauding him as like a martyr or like a man of faith and all of these things. And obviously his views were extremely hateful, extremely like anti everything that Jesus stood for, right? And so I've noticed a lot of people on social media and a lot of people who were still Christians having this moment of shock and like, wait, how can you possibly think that this man is anything like Jesus? That like people who maybe had never heard of him, had never like run into his rhetoric. If you are unfamiliar with who he was an extreme right wing. Most of his talking points were extremely misogynistic. Very famously said that he thought a few gun deaths a year were a necessary price to pay to preserve our Second Amendment rights. Like very famously said that he thought Black women do not have the same brain processing power as white men. Very famously said that if a as young as 9 or 10-year-old girl was SA'd and became pregnant as a result, that he would force her to deliver that baby and not be given the terminating care that she needs. So those are some of his top hits. Okay. So we're all together on the same page. And this light bulb moment for a lot of people who maybe weren't aware of him, but were still in the Christian church, became aware of him because of what happened and saw people's other Christians' responses and are completely like, what? The hypocrisy. And I had that moment myself in 2016. And a lot of, in the whole lead up, like 2015 and 2016, and the whole lead up to the 2016 election, like a lot of us who were young adults at the time in our 20s and things, we were like, you know, what? I had this moment where I had become more and more liberal throughout my 20s, living in a big city, living with people who look differently than me, seeing systemic oppression at work on a macro scale is a much different experience than living in a small town where you don't have as much diversity and you don't necessarily see those systems at play. Chicago's actually like a really great example because the city was designed in a very segregated way, and the way that some neighborhoods are given resources over others is definitely, you know, along those lines. And I'm not going to get into all of Chicago history. I love Chicago, really proud of Chicago, proud Chicagoan. And all that to say is I became more and more leftist as I lived here and as I just grew up and used my critical thinking skills and saw these systems at work. And this whole time I still thought, people from my hometown, people that, I went to church with growing up and stuff, like we're all ultimately on the same side. We're all ultimately want the world to be a better place. They just maybe have these conservative values because they don't really understand. They haven't really seen it. And then in 2015, 2016, when I saw evangelicals by and large like falling in line with Trump and becoming like supporting him, all the religious leaders, and trying to somehow act like this man was a Christian at all. Like Franklin Graham saying like, oh, he's just a baby Christian. I'm like, he has never repented for anything in his life. Repentance is like the first step to becoming a Christian. You have to acknowledge that you make mistakes and that you're a sinner. Like, it's called the sinner's prayer. And Trump doesn't think he's ever done anything wrong in his life. And I'm not a psychologist. I think he has some narcissistic personality disorder. That's just me, my total armchair diagnosis, in my opinion. But that kind of became like a loss of innocence moment for me when I started seeing evangelicals' behavior. And then I started realizing so many of their beliefs are just rooted in misogyny and white supremacy. And pretty much everything they care about the most, I'm like, throughout my whole childhood, throughout my whole adult life, I'm like, these issues that evangelicals care about so much are not issues that threaten anyone else. Like gay marriage doesn't hurt anyone else. Like, the inconsistencies, I started seeing the inconsistencies. I don't want to get into like every single political belief, but I started realizing that these were the things that threaten like male power and that threaten white power, and you can't unsee it. And thus began my religious deconstruction. And I want you to know, if you are having that moment right now with the Charlie Kirk stuff, that I have been where you are, and I understand what you're going through. It feels like a loss of innocence. It feels like you are suddenly seeing these people in a way that you've never seen them before, and you're starting to see them and be like, how can you be ultimately like a hateful person? Like at your heart, like how can anyone see the things this man said and think that he is a good representative of Jesus Christ? And I felt the same way in 2016. And it was a very big moment of disillusionment. And during that time for me, I still identified as Christian. I still attended church. And the church I attended was, I thought, more progressive than what it actually was. So it was a very multicultural church, and our leadership, did not support Trump and was very involved in like trying to, help people in our city. The reason, I just want to reiterate, the reason that I'm making this video now is not something I was planning to talk about. Honestly, if I did talk about it, I was going to maybe, when I make it, someday I might make a channel membership. Not right now, because that feels like too much pressure with like everything I have going on in my life. But I was going to maybe make it a video just for members only. But I feel like I want to make this a public video, even for people who don't subscribe to me, just anyone who's having that moment of disillusionment, because it can feel really isolating and it can feel like an identity crisis when you begin a deconstruction journey. And it's not even necessarily something you choose to undertake. Like, I did not choose to lose my entire belief system that had been like most of my identity for the first almost 30 years of my life. Like, I didn't actively choose that, It's very scary. So from those initial moments of disillusionment, I still kept going to church. My church was not LGBTQ affirming, and I had kind of been a little naive to that. I had kind of been like, well, maybe it's just like it's the denomination, but like since we're so like progressive when it comes to like, all these different races and having conversations about racial reconciliation, like, maybe I can bring these conversations to. And they were very resistant to that. And turns out there were a lot of like really homophobic people in my church. And to that extent, a lot of really misogynistic people in my church. And that was a really big disappointment. Even though the denomination does ordain women, there were a lot of very traditional gender role views, even in Chicago and in this church that I thought was progressive. And I really like tried to fight for that. And ultimately, at one point, I remember, so at one point I was listening to a podcast that is specifically for people who kind of like to talk about like the gray areas and these different issues and things. And they had this guest on, and she was talking about how the idea of being a sinner, right? Like the idea of having a sinful nature, she didn't consent to that. Like it's not, and therefore like it's not her fault. So why is she responsible for being a sinner? Like why was she going to be punished? Like the whole idea is that we're all sinners and we deserve to go to HE double hockey sticks. But God sent Jesus as like a blood sacrifice to cover our sins, and therefore that like redeems us, and then we can go to heaven. And she was like, how is any of this my fault? Because they also teach you that like you're just born with a sinful nature. You can't help it, like ever since Eve ate the apple. And that was like a breaking moment for me where I was like, oh, like the whole idea of the crucifixion and resurrection does not seem like this beautiful redemption story anymore. It seems like this weird like manipulation. And I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't go back. I had many nights where I was like lying in bed, like praying and like asking God to restore my faith. And I couldn't like make myself believe it. I couldn't. And then I'm not this way anymore. I don't believe in demons. I don't believe in demon possession. But then I was afraid I was going to be possessed by a demon because I no longer had like the cloak of Christ's salvation around me. If you are not Christian, if you've never grown up Christian, if some of this lingo seems wild to you, like it's very normal for those of us who grew up in Christianity. And by the way, this video is not to like try to convince anyone to leave Christianity or to stop believing Christianity. I have a lot of friends who have made deconstruction journeys who are still very Christian. I have a lot of friends who are, like very committed, friends and family who are very committed to Christianity. And I still consider myself a follower of the teachings of Jesus, because the teachings of Jesus are really dope. And the character of Jesus being a refugee, being born into poverty, and then speaking truth to power, like pointing out religious hypocrisy, standing up against a brutal empire, and ultimately being killed because he threatened power by, telling everyone to take care of each other and to take care of the poor and to take care of the least of these. And like his messages were very extremely threatening to the Roman Empire. So I think the teachings of Jesus are dope, and like whatever your religious journey is, I respect it. I'm simply sharing my journey and sharing my story for people who in this moment need to hear it. People who in this moment are feeling lost and scared. I have been there. So around that time, I decided to take a break from going to church. And I had previously been extremely involved in my church. I had gone there for years, like ever since I moved to Chicago. I started going there. I became involved in the choir. I became a worship leader on the worship team. I was an usher sometimes. I was in a small group, like several over the years that I was there. I was very involved. Like people knew me in a very visible way. Obviously, like I had purple hair the last couple years that I was there. I started doing this years and years ago. So I was very recognizable. People knew me, and I stopped going. And it was the summer of 2019. And, a couple months went by, and literally no one reached out to me from the church. And I was like, you know what? it's summer. Like, I have often been gone in the summers in the past at like a summer opera festival or travel. You know, people's lives are different in the summer. Like, they maybe aren't thinking anything of it. And then more and more months go by and no one reaches out to me. Christmas comes around, no one reaches out. I'm like, okay, they don't want me back. They don't care that I left. And at the time, I was like, I had thought that my questioning certain aspects of the faith and questioning church practices, especially when it comes to women and LGBTQ people, I had thought that that was like way more subtle. In hindsight, I now realize it was not very subtle at all, and I was probably making people uncomfortable, and they were probably happy that I took myself out of the equation. But that was a very disillusioning moment for me as well, to have given so much of my time and energy and talent for free, turning down paid church gigs so that I could voluntarily sing at this church because it's what I believed in, and then to leave without anyone reaching out to me. No calls, no texts, no emails, nothing. And they all had my number, they all had my email, they, like nothing, like silence, crickets. That was hard. That hurts. It still hurts to this day, honestly. Like, I'm still kind of pissed about it, honestly. Like, that was shitty of you guys. If anyone is watching this from that church, I'm not going to call out the church itself, but like, that was real shitty of you guys. Like, you could have at least like reached out as a friend. I thought we were friends, but some people even like unfriended me on Facebook and stuff. It was, like, I didn't leave like with a bang. I didn't make an ultimatum. I didn't like cause a ruckus. I just kind of was like, okay, I'm going to take a little break. And my intention was always to go back. But because no one ever reached out to me, I never went back, which I think is fair. But I know other people have had deconstruction journeys. So I joined groups online with other people who were deconstructing as well, and had created kind of private spaces, and everybody's in different places. Some people are still Christian or have like deconstructed all the way and reconstructed and like decided to be a Christian, decided to be an atheist, decided to be agnostic or any other religion. And other people are kind of still in the middle of it, like the I don't know. And there are people who are queer who have gone like no contact with their families, and just people in all different walks of life. A very supportive community. So I do want to let you know again, like, if you just had that moment where something broke for you when you saw how evangelicals were reacting to Charlie Kirk, you are not alone. Like, so many people have had that moment, and like, they will support you. Like, there are spaces where you can ask your questions, and there are spaces where you can connect with other people on this journey. So, again, that's why I keep reiterating this, but there was a big wave of people who deconstructed in the post-Trump era. And then 2020 comes around, and there was another huge wave of people who had that light bulb moment, who had that breaking moment when they saw the church's response to COVID. And they saw people in the church not caring about masking, not caring about people with disabilities or chronic illnesses, going down the QAnon conspiracy theory pipeline, like all this stuff. So that was another huge like group of people who had that realization moment of seeing just the absolute hypocrisy of evangelicals and having this watershed moment. And so the groups swelled again, like we got a bunch of new members, we got a bunch of new people, and that it continues to, I think there's a part of me that continues to have these new breaking moments every time, because I still hold out hope, I still hope that they can be better, that they can actually follow the Bible and actually follow Jesus. So I kind of had another one of those mini moments when COVID happened, and all of these churches were like, we have to meet in person, and like no masks, and as if they were somehow facing religious persecution because they were being asked not to have these huge super spreader events that could literally kill people. They were being asked to prioritize people who have illnesses and to wear masks and like protect each other. Like, yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to see that. It's hard to learn about Jesus growing up and really be into the Bible and do Bible quizzing and have so many formative memories in church and youth group and things. And then to see all those people that you shared pews with have such hateful views. It's hard. It sucks. It's really hard. And like, it's heartbreaking. It's disillusioning. And sometimes it's even within your own family and you don't know how to navigate that. Like, it can feel really lonely, and you can feel a loss of community because a lot of us were very involved in our churches, and a loss of identity. For me, it was a huge identity crisis, and mine was going right into COVID. So not only am I isolated because I've already removed myself from this church community in June of 2019, but with them not reaching out, I never went back. And then the panini happens and we're all isolated and music shuts down too. So suddenly I'm like, I don't have community there, you know? It was a tough time. It was a really tough time. And then coming out of the panini, that's when I get a 9-to-5 and begin my process of exiting Beachbody as well. So I lost all of my communities and all of everything that I felt like was my identity: Christianity, being a singer, and Beachbody. Those were like my sun, moon, and rising. My Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Like, they were my big three, and I lost them all. And it was tough. Like, I don't know, that's like a little bit of an understatement. I did not know who I was. I did not know what my foundation was to build on. I had to like try to find myself. I felt like a failure because I had not like succeeded in Beachbody. Obviously, I've worked through that now. Like, getting a 9-to-5 felt like a huge failure for me. So I think this is the most like transparent and vulnerable I've ever been on this channel when I talk about what was happening in my life when I was exiting Beachbody. Like, I had like nothing else. I had nothing else like in my life going on. It was kind of the last thing I was holding on to. But again, once you see things, you can't unsee them. And kind of the critical thinking skills and just the thought processes that had happened in my religious deconstruction applied to Beachbody. And it's again, it feels like you're not intentionally deconstructing. You're not intentionally being like, oh, I'm going to pull this apart and I'm going to poke holes in this and I'm going to find the arguments. Like, it feels like it's happening to you. So if you are going through that and you feel like it's happening to you and you're almost like trying to hold on to the belief systems that you had, like, I get it. I've been there. It feels like it's happening to you. It doesn't feel like it's something you're actively seeking out. It would feel easier to continue to just believe what you've always believed. It is so destabilizing and so terrifying to lose your beliefs and then feel like you're just free falling and you have nothing holding you up. It's terrifying, and I have been there, but it gets better. So I want to say this is just one video, and this topic is so big and nuanced, and I could probably do a whole video series on religious deconstruction, but there are a lot of people in the religious deconstruction space that are talking about this on all sorts of platforms, and I don't even know if like I'm gonna be the person that like people need to hear from, but I just felt, to use a Christian phrase, I felt called to make this video when I saw the reactions of so many of my mutuals, you know, kind of having that moment. I could just like, even through a I guess thread, I'm not on Twitter, so I want to say a tweet, a thread of someone kind of being in shock at Christians' behavior. I could feel that emotion. Like I'm with you. Like I feel that emotion, and it does get so much better. And it wasn't like it was miserable, like the whole, 3 years that I was in that in-between space. I probably had been deconstructing for years prior to 2019 or prior to 2016. I just remember these key moments. And as I left Beachbody and I kind of had a whole mentee bee, as the kids say, I got into therapy, and I had been making friends in these deconstruction communities. I started auditioning again. I got in, started doing community theater, made so many friends through different shows as the world started opening back up. And, I started to find my identity in the things that like are just me. And that was a really beautiful journey when you don't have to put everything that you know and love into like either like, oh, but my identity in Christ is more important and I have to use these talents for the church and I have to use these talents to build up the kingdom. Like that's more important. And or you don't have to package it for social media to be like, okay, I have to like sprinkle all these different things because this is my brand, and then I have to put in stuff about my MLM and do that. Like my identity was no longer for anyone but me. It was no longer to be used for the church or for some like, divine entity or for an MLM or anything like that. It was literally just for me, and I could take time off of social media and I didn't have to share everything. And it was really cool to meet Bethany over the last few years and to just be like, oh, I like this, I'm going to do this. I like this, I'm going to do this. And like even the process of doing a whole makeup artist certification and then like consciously deciding like, I don't want to do this as a business. I do like doing other people's makeup. I like doing my own makeup the most, but I didn't want to. There's a lot of upfront cost to being a makeup artist. You have to have a lot of products, and then there's travel involved, and everything's in person. And I was like, I'm not giving up my weekends to do brides for weddings. So to make the conscious decision of like, I did this whole certification, and it was still worth it for my own like artistic learning. I learned skills, and that can be enough of a reward. I don't have to monetize everything. Leaving the MLM, like rediscovering who I am outside of a religious context, outside of a context where my inner thoughts are all being monitored by a sky daddy. Like I don't have to police my thoughts. I don't have to constantly be afraid of my sinful nature. I can choose what I believe to be right and wrong and make my decisions accordingly. And I can create my own ethic around everything. And I've talked a little bit about, purity culture. I think purity culture I could make a whole video on purity culture too, but it's just a control tactic to control women specifically. And I know it's harmed men too. I have some male friends from the deconstruction community, and purity culture has definitely harmed them as well, but it's definitely a tactic to control women and to kind of get back into my body, like reclaim my body, not only from religion, but also from Beachbody, has been really cool. Like my body is no longer this stumbling block that like causes men to sin and that I have to cover up or that I have to dress a certain way. It's also not a product of the product. It's not an advertisement for whatever health and fitness stuff I'm doing right now. It is mine. And what I wear is an expression of who I am and my personality. I've actually gotten really into fashion. Actually, not even fashion, because fashion changes and fashion is trends. I've gotten into style the last few years and really deciding and shaping my closet to reflect my personal style and what I love. And that's been a really fun journey. Reclaiming my body from Christianity and purity culture and Beachbody has been really, really incredible. There's so many things that I've discovered about myself since leaving religion. And so I do want to say, I was doom and gloom there for a little bit, but to the people who are having that moment that may be kicking off a deconstruction journey, like, I know how terrified you are, but it is hard, and I've been there, but like, it's so worth it. It is so worth it coming out the other side as a whole liberated person who thinks for herself, who has full ownership over her body, her life, her decisions, without having to please, people at your church or justify anything to Christians. I don't, or even what I imagine a God would think, which was really just how people have interpreted the Bible and theology and stuff. It's not even like they'll say like, oh, this is what God says about blah, 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 blah. But that's just what they say. That's how they've interpreted it. I have gotten really into tarot because it is completely my own intuition. So if I feel like I want to have that comfort of a spiritual practice, I can do like a tarot spread and I can interpret the cards. And it's all, I get the final say. Like, it's not, the cards aren't telling me to do something or not to do something, or that something is wrong or right. I'm just laying out a spread of cards, interpreting them, and if I feel like that helped me, then awesome. I actually did a tarot spread for the cast of Hunchback of Notre Dame. We had a 2-show day, and so in between our afternoon and our evening show, I did a tarot spread for us, and it ended up like totally being the plot of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, which was kind of hilarious. We were like, how did that happen? It was really funny, but that's gonna be, I'm gonna wrap this up because this was a lot of me sharing vulnerably, and it was a major departure from what I usually talk about, although I did throw in some MLM stuff in there, and evangelical Christianity and MLMs are like besties, like have been historically since like early Amway days. So that is, it's a connection, so, but I felt like I needed to make this because I am so much farther along on having gone through a lot of stuff I see people starting to go through. And I just hope that this reaches the right person who needs to see it, and that you feel comforted, and that you feel seen, and that you feel like you're not alone, because you're not. And we'll be there for you on this whole journey. So anyway, that's going to be it from me today. If you liked this video and if you like anti-MLM content, please subscribe to my channel. If you already are a subscriber and you want more content like this, or if you want me to react to like religious influencers or evangelical people online, let me know. I don't know if I can commit to that. It would depend on, I know Julie Joe has done some reaction to Girl Defined, and I'm like, I don't know if I can keep my cool enough, because evangelical influencers really get my goat. So maybe it would be like once every other month or something. But anyway, if you have more questions, or if you want to hear more about this, please let me know in the comments, and take care of each other. Kiss your pets on their little heads for me, and I'll see you in the next one. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled MLM reactions. All right. Bye, everybody. Mwah.
What does perfect even